for your time and presence. Thank you. Well, the Deputy Prime Minister has to chair a session in the Congress Center, I think so, at 10 o'clock, so we have to let him go. Thank you, Excellency. So now it's my pleasure to move on with the discussions. We have a very, very good lineup, very, exciting people who have done a lot of work in this area and other areas which will allow us to enrich our whole understanding regarding where do we stand and how do we move forward in this context. So I'm going to call on Ana Luisa Cortez. Dr. Cortez is a very, very long-standing veteran of the UNLDC. Those who, I don't suspect anybody doesn't know this, but the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, the major think, one of the major think tanks, with UNCTAD and others around. I cannot overemphasize the role of UNLDC. And Anna's most important contribution, apart from others, and that she had been associated or writing this, contributing to the world economic situation and prospects, particularly 2006, and then the survey in 2007. And from 2007, which is important for us, she is the one who is secretary to the Committee for Development Policy. As you know, development policy is the one which really holds the key to the club. It allows the LDCs to get in. It sometimes kicks out countries. So it's a set of the Committee for Development Policy, how it is called now. Anna is the gatekeeper in that way. So we are very pleased to have Ana Cortez with us here. Ana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deb. I'm very happy to be here with you. Good morning, everybody. But since you mentioned the club, I used to say that the LDCs is a very special club. Nobody wants to get in, nobody wants to get out. So it's a puzzle. So I'm going to talk to you very briefly a little bit about the CDP, the Committee for Development Policy, and its role in identifying the LDCs. Then I'm going to move on to the Istanbul Plan of Action and the question of monitoring. Monitoring the goals, what is done through the triennial reviews of the list of LDCs, and monitoring actions through the delivery of international support measures available for LDCs. That's a new initiative that we are doing at CDP-DESA. So CDP, as you may know, is a subsidiary body of the Economic and Social Council, and it has two main functions. One is to provide the Council with policy advice, and the other one is the identification of the LDCs. In that role, it conducts triennial reviews when it reviews all those developing countries, low-income developing countries that may qualify to join the list of LDCs, and those who are in the list that may qualify to exit the category. And aside of that, CDP has also been in charge with monitoring the graduating countries, meaning countries that have been identified to be graduated but are still LDCs, and graduated countries. And we in the Secretariat, we provide support for the committee. So how the committee understands LDCs? In the view of the committee, LDCs are understood as low-income countries that face structural handicaps to growth. The income is measured by the GNI per capita, and the structural impediments to growth are measured by two composite index. One is called the Human Asset Index, and it tries to capture the level of human development. And the other one is called the Economic Vulnerability Index, and it captures structural vulnerability to shocks, both economic shocks and natural shocks. So how that definition relates to the Istanbul Plan of Action. As you know, the overarching goal of the is to overcome the structural challenges to eradicate poverty, achieve the internationally agreed development goals, and enable graduation from the LDC category. So they have an overarching goal and they have specific goals or specific objectives. And those specific objectives aim at enabling half of LDCs to meet the graduation criteria by 2020. And how? What would be the specific objectives to meet that overarching? Achieve growth in LDCs at least 7% per annum, and this has a straight relationship with the GNI, the criteria for graduation. Build human capacities, it reflects the AGI. Reduce vulnerability of LDCs to economic, natural, and environmental shocks, so it has a direct link to the index that CDP used, the EVI. Ensure financial resources and their effective use for LDC's development. It has to do with all the three criteria that CDP uses, and enhance good governance at all levels, which also has a positive implication for the three criteria. So these are the three criteria that CDP uses, and these are the indicators that are monitored every 3 years. So by this exercise of the CDP then relates with the goal, the overarching goal, and we do this kind of monitoring there. Important to just remark that graduation in the CDP context is a moving target. This is GNI, the threshold for GNI, because LDC is a relative category. It's in relation to the rest of the low-income countries. So as the group moves up, the LDCs are supposed to move up as well until they catch them and exit the category. So again, the objective of the plan of action is to meet the graduation criteria, which means that the LDCs have to satisfy 2 of the 3 criteria, GNI, AGI, and EPI. Now, the plan of action then identify actions and targets in several priority areas. And again, as you can see from the slide, there is a straight relationship between the areas and targets that the plan establishes with the criteria that the CDP uses for identifying and graduating LDCs. So there is a major priority in productive capacity, agriculture, trade, and you see in the slide how this relates to the 3 criteria. So when you compare the Istanbul Plan of Action with the previous plans of actions, you see that the objectives are much more in tune with the CDP concept of LDCs than the previous plans. And we understand this as a progress, because if the CDP is the organ that identifies LDCs, the process of a plan to improve the conditions of LDCs should be, they should talk, right? They should be in sync. Again, and also graduation is an explicit objective of the plan of action for the first time as well. The other 3, of course, it was to improve the living conditions, reduce poverty, but they did not mention the initial graduation. And now the question is that with all these actions, and that when he was in New York last month, he identified over 100 actions and targets. The question that one would pose to oneself would be, do they have the tools, the LDCs, to execute all those agreed actions? So that's the bigger question hanging in the air, or the white elephant in the room that we are not sure. So now I would like to talk a little bit about, we are talking about actions, and what would be those actions from the international community in support of the LDCs. So what we do also in the CDP was to look at what are the measures that were especially designed to assist LDCs. And we classify those measures in three categories. First is ODA, both in terms of financial flows and technical assistance, being given by both multilateral and bilateral donors. And here, of course, other developing countries have received ODA flows, but we include those years because there are specific targets for LDCs. The other big support measure for LDC is in the area of international trade, both in the special preferential treatment on WTO obligations and as well on market access. And there are then what we call other forms of support, miscellaneous forms of support, such as caps to the contribution to the UN budget, discounts on the peacekeeping operations. There are several travel funds that are established for LDCs. There are special technical assistance funds, etc. And these are all LDC-specific measures, meaning that once a country is no longer an LDC, in theory, that country would not have access to those measures of support. We are also looking what is going on in terms of these measures, in terms of their effectiveness. So we look in the supply side, and of course, maybe I don't need to preach to the converter here, but there are problems of design flaws, including the fact that some of these measures are not attuned to the conditions existing in LDCs. There are gaps in delivery of these measures, and the issue of ODA is the most obvious one. There are several neutralizers of the measures. For instance, you have duty-free quota-free, but at the same time you have rules of origin that do not allow you to use the duty-free quota-free preference. There is also a problem of lack of coherence in international policy making. For instance, several of the SDGs that the LDCs are entitled to in WTO, they are offset by structural adjustment programs of the fund and the bank that do not allow them to use such as certain trims, certain subsidization of exports, etc. Some of these measures are also have a problem or being underfunded. There is not enough financial support for some of the initiatives. They are not so effective because they sometimes are disconnected to goals and to targets in the plan, and they are very difficult to locate and to access. From the demand side or from the LDC side, the problem that exists is that they are unaware of the existing measures and conditions, especially those in WTO and the little funds, technical funds. We feel also that there is a lack of ownership because they don't know, and there is a feeling that they are on the receiving side and not actually that they can go and talk to their partners about the delivery of the support measures. So there is not a proactive position vis-a-vis these the measures. So we felt that this was a problem, particularly the green ones that are highlighting greens, because when comes to graduation time, or when CDP identified LDCs to be graduated,